Today's reading is taken from Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 to 20. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way as you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So, in everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this sums up the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes, or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, and a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Thank you, Alison. So now Steve's going to come back and take us on in our next step in our kingdom journey.
Amen.
Thanks, Steve.
It's a wonderful joy to come and speak to you again. And I must admit that as a church we're rather playing with fire if we sing an African hymn and then they ask me to preach. Because what many of you don't realise is back in the mid-80s when I was learning to preach, I used to spend a lot of my time on Sundays sneaking into black Pentecostal churches around Brooks Bar in Manchester. You've got the New Testament Church of God there, Sharon Pentecostal Church, and I used to study the way the black preachers would preach, and I absolutely adored it. I had cassette tapes imported from America that I could listen to on the radio, and I was just reflecting on that because I remembered that I went to visit the New Testament Church of God at Brooks Bar in Manchester one time and heard a wonderful sermon, and I waited behind to speak to the minister, and I asked him, "How did you learn to preach like that?" And he said, "Brother," he said, "I have a method." He said, "Every Sunday," he said, "I reads myself full, then I praise myself hot, then I lets myself go." So you better be careful this morning because that's exactly what I'm tempted to do. Anyway, I shall restrain myself.
No, don't. Go for it.
No. You keep telling me off for behaving like that, so I'm gonna be a good boy again. But I find it so hard. So we're going to begin Matthew chapter 7, Kingdom Attitude. We are getting towards the end of this series, and when I was asked to speak about this, I focused mainly on the word attitude rather than kingdom, because I thought that's an important word, a word that we use all the time, but what does the word attitude mean? And when I spoke about kingdom peace to you a couple of weeks ago, it was from a passage that did not include the word peace. Now I'm speaking about attitude from a passage that does not include the word attitude. So maybe we should look at this word attitude. We use it all the time and ask ourselves, what does it mean? What do we mean by attitude? And if you're a frustrated parent of a teenager, I'm not talking about what teenagers give you when I say attitude, because they do, but I found a couple of excellent definitions from a couple of dictionaries. One of them says attitude is a settled way of thinking or feeling about something. And another one says, with regard to a person or thing, tendency or orientation, especially of the mind. Now, if you put those two together, we end up with a settled orientation of the mind. It's how you look out on the world and how you interpret things, how you see them, how you respond, how you react to everything that's going on all around you or in your home. But also, if you think about your attitude, it's how other people see you too. If people know what your attitude is like, maybe at work, maybe in your home, then when certain situations happen, they know how you're going to react. Sometimes you find children do certain things that they know will annoy their parents because of their attitude, and they hide those things away, hoping the parents won't find out about it. It's how the world sees you too. And as we're getting nearer to the end of our series on the Sermon on the Mount, I noticed that Alan posted in this week's newsletter. And he wrote these words, and I thought this is quite significant. He said, I chose the kingdom theme, in other words, the Sermon on the Mount, as it felt like the right time to refocus our attention on the part we play individually in our families and groups and corporately as God's church in bringing the kingdom here in our community as it is in heaven. And I put those two things together. Our settled orientation of mind could have a significant effect on God bringing the kingdom on earth in our local community. If people see us as kingdom people, Christian people, with a different way of thinking and reacting and acting, could that bring the kingdom a little bit closer in our local community? As a body, we must long for a genuine kingdom attitude and understand this is how the world outside will see us. So first of all, as we think about kingdom attitude, let's talk about sawdust and planks. You can see the image there that I mentioned earlier on the ramp up of a man trying to remove a speck of sawdust from his brother's eye with tweezers whilst wearing a plank across his own eyes. This is what Jesus spoke of in our text. As we think about kingdom attitude, here's a test. If you really messed up in a significant way, ethically, morally, you did wrong. You felt the weight of that as a Christian person. You know that you've sinned. You're horrified by what you've done, and you know that you need to deal with it. Where would you go? Would your first thought be, I need to go to church? Or would you think, what reception would I expect in that church if I did wrong? Maybe I won't go because of how they will react. If it's not church, is it a fear of criticism or judgment? You failed, so you want to hide away from God's people because of how they will react. Think about that. Do you think that people might wear a log across their eyes, a plank, whilst rummaging in your eye with their tweezers? I used to be a member of a church that became famous for its gossip and for criticism. It came from the leaders down, and unfortunately it infected me. I became one of those people. I was a leader in that organization. But if you listen to the people talk in church, you'd never hear any gossip. But they became famous for gossip. And you know why? They wouldn't actually gossip. They would share prayer requests. Oh, have you heard about such and such a brother? We need to pray for him. He's got serious marriage problems, you know. I heard about it. Let's pray. Now, Christians don't gossip. They just share prayer requests. Don't think about it. I'll just leave that one right there with you. Have you ever done that? There's something you've heard and you really want to share with people. You want to gossip, but you can't because you're a Christian, so you share it as a prayer request. I better not say any more about that because I find myself criticizing people for being so critical, which is wrong of me, isn't it? Now, verses 1 and 2 are two of the most terrifying verses in the Bible. Have you ever dwelt on those verses and thought, what does this say to me? It says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Ooh. These are not an absolute ban on judging, but rather a terrifying warning. Hear the Amplified translation of what it says. Do not judge and criticize and condemn others, so that you may not be judged and criticized and condemned yourselves. For just as you judge and criticize and condemn others, you will be judged and criticized and condemned. And in accordance with the measure you use to deal out to others, it will be dealt out again to you. The Bible nowhere says you must never, under any circumstances, judge. It talks about pigs and dogs later in our text, saying there are certain circumstances where you need to pick up your gospel message when people are mocking and blaspheming and just walk away. You need to make that choice occasionally, but it's so rare. It does say, though, that when you pick up a moral measure, God's warning us about something. Thunder, lightning, don't do this, it says. And you pick up that measure and say, right, you're so big, your morals, your ethics, they fall way short of that. Then put your measure down. It says one day God is going to pick up that measure and put it next to you. So how did you perform according to your own standards? When you said that person was wrong for doing that, you saw them falling into adultery maybe, or falling into theft or robbery, but in your heart, like we saw earlier in other messages, you were doing those things yourself. You never outwardly did it. But in your heart, how is your heart? By this measure, God says. It's so dangerous to judge. So do it rarely and be very careful. We'll see your faces. It's a good job you got masks on, because I don't think anybody's smiling. This is not a call to be gullible. It's a call to judge yourself before you judge others. If I can ever share any wisdom with people that I've learned over my years, it is judge yourself first. Deal with yourself before you rush on to judge others. There's an ancient spiritual practice called the examen. I mentioned this earlier. It's something I used to do. I read about it in a book, and I thought that is so wise and so good. It was Richard Foster's book on prayer. If you ever want to find a book on prayer, read that. It's basically an audit or a review of each and every day. It's a biblical idea. Sorry, skipping that one. This one. At the end of your day, the examine, this old Christian practice used to say, sit down or kneel down and review your day. Audit your day. Count your blessings. Give God thanks for them. Find your failures. Ask God, and that's what we see in this verse here. Ask God to show you your sins, your failures. Where have you gone wrong? Ask him why you did it. Are there any lessons to learn? Then pray for forgiveness. Then pray for the following day, that whatever you've learned from this day, you will wisely carry it into the next day. It's a good practice. And look at these words. This is part of the examen. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me, test me, judge me, and know my thoughts. See if there's any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Before you judge your brother, before you anger with those in your family or your workplace, have you sat down and asked God, look at me. Where am I wrong? What do I need to learn? And Richard Foster, when he examined this principle that he'd learned, he said it helps us to travel along a narrow road as Christians. This narrow road has a dangerous ditch on both sides. On one side is the glib, happy-clappy kind of Christianity, where we just thank God for the victory and ignore our failures, where we say, I know all is well with my soul. I'm fine. I'm saved. I'm forgiven. Doesn't matter what I've done today. I thank God for saving me. And you fall into that ditch. But on the other side of the road, there's another ditch. A ditch of self-condemnation and failure where you say, God, I'm not redeemable. I've messed up. How can I call myself a Christian? I can't go to church and show my face to people. Bang, I'm in that ditch. Meanwhile, there's a narrow, difficult middle road. where you say every day, I know, God, you gave me grace. I know you forgave me. I know I'm a Christian. Thank God for the work of Jesus. But Lord, examine me. I failed today. I thank you for my blessings. I thank you for the victory. But today, I did this. I thought that. I said this. Lord, why did I do it? Lord, forgive me. Help me to learn the lesson and move on. And you know what? I found because I was a very judgmental person, when I began to do that, I didn't have time to judge other people. I was so busy dealing with my failures and my angers that there was no time to judge others. And that's a good place to be. And Richard Foster went on, he said this: in the examen of conscience, we are inviting the Lord to search our hearts to the depths. Far from being dreadful, this is scrutiny of love. There is therefore no need to repress, suppress, or sublimate any of God's truth about ourselves. Full, total self-knowledge is the bread by which we are sustained. A yes to life means an honest recognition of our own evil, but it is also a yes to God, who in the midst of our evil sustains us and draws us into his righteousness. Self-knowledge. You look at other people and their failures and say, I understand. And you know what? Jesus died for them too. There is hope. There is grace. Come. I have this kingdom attitude now. Come closer to him. I invite you. I want to ask you a question. If you were struggling with moral failure and needing help, wouldn't you rush to a church full of people who are struggling in prayer and fellowship to remove the planks in their own eyes rather than examining the sawdust in others? Wouldn't you join such a people? There's a kingdom attitude. People will flock to be around people like that because they know they've failed. And when they find Christians aren't judgmental people, they are moral bankrupts too, who are saved by the grace of God. They will flock to join you. Now, let's move on. Next thought. Here's a thought that I claim as my own. I struggled a few years ago to describe something that was moving in my heart, and I came up with this phrase, that we become the image of the God we worship. Bear with me. If your God is a hard, angry, selfish taskmaster, then you become a hard, angry Christian, and you begrudge service in the church. In Matthew 25, Jesus told a parable, and he included this phrase where one of the people of the talents said, Lord, I knew that you were a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you did not scatter. There are people who serve a God, and they think that their God is like that. He just demands of you morality, ethics, always doing the right thing, always being in church. And they begin to begrudge him, and they treat other people in that way. They become hard, angry Christians. But in 2 Corinthians we see it says, and we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into his image with ever-increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. You become just like the God that you worship. Jesus talked about asking, seeking, knocking. This describes Christians who believe in a God who answers prayer, a God who wants to bless, who wants to pour out his Spirit and blessing and sustain us. They believe in him. So when they don't see an answer, they ask. When they don't receive immediately, they seek, they go looking for God. They knock and petition God, Lord, bless me. They believe in a Father in heaven who gives their daily bread. And when they believe in that kind of God, Jesus said, you are like parents. God is like your parent. Your child seeks bread. Do you give him a stone? They ask for a fish. Would you give them a snake? Do you think God is like that? Do you think God will give them the wrong thing? They believe in a God who provides what they need. And they become like that God. They change into his image. They see the world around them that lacks, a world that needs help, a world that is despairing. And they no longer think of themselves. They see the God of the Bible and they think, I want to meet those needs. I want to help. I don't just want for me, I want to provide for others. I want to be a giver, not a taker. If you see a God who is perfect, liberal, loving, and overflowing with kindness, then you will become like him. And those outside the walls of the church, they will see this and they will be drawn to him. This is kingdom attitude. In verse 12 it says in the Amplified, I'm using that a lot today because I spent a lot of time reading that this week. In verse 12, the golden rule we call it. So then whatever you desire that others would do to and for you, even so do also to and for them, because this sums up the law and the prophets. This is a part of the Bible that nearly everybody outside the church knows. Whatever you want others to do for you, you do for them. They know about that. And it's used in many religions, or normally it's put negatively. Don't do to others what you don't want them to do to you. Jesus made it positive. Rabbi Hillel, a famous rabbi who died just before Jesus' ministry began, once said to a convert to Judaism, "What is hateful to yourself, do not do to another. That is the whole law. Everything else is commentary." Jesus said something similar when he said, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And the second one is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself." All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. Christianity is so simple. Love God, love your neighbor. Jesus said this encompasses the whole of the Bible. Basically, he was quoting Hillel, who said, everything else is commentary. If you love God with a passion and then go outside these walls and love your neighbor with a generosity and a kindness that reflects your love for God, then you are doing everything that needs to be done. And people will see this kingdom attitude and they will be drawn to him. Many churches have developed a reputation as being selfish, a bit cliquey. It's hard to get into them. They are holy clubs. They have a resentful, angry membership who find outsiders to be messy and inconvenient. That's why Jesus summarized everything about Christianity into 2 verses. All we are called to do is love God, love your neighbor. Anybody can do that. Any child can understand it. We've made it so complicated. Meanwhile, Jesus is making it so simple. Now let's ask this question. If you found a people who loved you the way they love themselves and did for you as they would have others do for them, wouldn't you join them? Wouldn't you go to that church with that kingdom attitude? Wouldn't you be drawn towards it? Now, finally, Jesus makes it clear that the Christian path is narrow and difficult. There is a small gate that requires a very low bow in order to pass through it. Yet Jesus warns of people who will present a different kind of Christianity. He calls them false prophets, a self-indulgent Christianity where God is your servant and he comes only to bless you. But Jesus said, no, the way that we travel is narrow, is difficult, is through a narrow gate. There will be difficult times. Let's go back to one of our earlier messages in Matthew chapter 5. In verse 10, he says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness. Theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." The Christian life will often be hard, and I mentioned this last time I spoke. We can be in the midst of difficulties, but we are not alone. When we struggle, it is because of him. Too often we focus on trying to make life easier, and we will even compromise our faith, our speech, because it's easier that way. There are people who tell us that now we are Christians, it should be blessing, blessing, blessing. And there will be blessings. I remember years and years ago when I was pastoring in St. Petersburg in Russia, it was right at the time of the economic collapse. Just in 93, I arrived there when the economy had collapsed, everything was wrong, there was poverty, people were starving to death in their apartments. And we had this little old lady, we call them babushkas, who used to come to church every Sunday, and we discovered she had no food, so we'd have a loaf of bread ready for her every Sunday when she came to church. We'd give it to her. That's not why she came, but we just wanted to bless her. And an evangelist arrived in the city because it was the Wild West, everybody was coming. He flew in on his private jet and arrived and did this big stadium celebration, and she went along to this. And the next Sunday she came to church, and I tried to give her this loaf of bread. She said, "No, I don't want it." I said, "Oh," I said, "are you blessed?" I said, "Have you got bread at home?" She said, No, I've got nothing." So here's the bread. She said, "No, I was told that I should give, and I gave my pension, and then I would receive. I'm going to receive." And I begged her to take the bread. And I couldn't live with myself. 2 days later, I went round to her apartment and found she still had nothing in her apartment. And finally, she took the bread. We are here as a body for one another. It isn't just that life is going to be broad, easy, we're going to be blessed, 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 blessed. We are going to have hard times. We know we are going to have hard times. And that is why we are not alone. We are a body. And God provides through the body. She was ashamed that she didn't have enough faith, she said, that she had to ask me to help her. Well, thank God when people have someone they can ask. Aren't you glad that you can turn around and find people who will help you when you need help? We have a kingdom attitude. We are not alone in this. We do not give in order to receive. We do not pray to change God's mind so that our will shall be done on earth as well as in heaven. This is often a narrow and a difficult road, and it's often a lonely road. We often walk through the valley of the shadow of death. But we say with David, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." When you travel a narrow, dark, and difficult road, you are never alone. David said, "You are with me. You are with me. You are with me." Somehow, those outside the church know authenticity when they see it. I think people can smell authenticity. When it's real, they know it. I've got a final question. If you find those who serve, those who are with you in the struggle to overcome sin, yet without judgment, those who treat you the way they would like to be treated, those who overflow with generosity and kindness, those with this kingdom attitude, would you not long to be a part of what you see? Christian, could you become what you want to see? Liberal, overflowing, non-judgmental, kind, gentle, listening. Could you become that person that you want to see? That's the kingdom attitude. And if you do that, basically I'm saying, could you become the church that you want to be a part of? What kind of church do you want to join? Could you be that church? I'll join you in that struggle. The Lord bless you.